Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for coming out today. This report that I'm going to talk about doesn't actually talk about the Colorado River at all. That wasn't the point, which I'll explain in a second. But it probably, maybe, could be useful. And that's, I think, why I'm here. But Hannah Holm and I worked on this report together last year. And Hannah is now the former director, or in transition, former director at the Hutchins Water Center at Colorado Mesa University, and is now the associate director for policy of the Southwest region for American rivers. My slide wasn't updated. I didn't know that until yesterday. All right, so for this project, Hannah's and my big question was, what lessons can we learn from interstate compact administration? So from other river basins that have gone through compact administration, I'm sure they have learned some things that they now use as they go forward through time. Now, I did a number of interviews in all three of these basins. And what was pointed out to me repeatedly by every single water lawyer I talked to was the compacts are very, very different. This is true. They are very different. So this report is not at all a comparison of the compacts themselves, but rather the lessons that emerged from them. So in order to do that, this is based on 20 interviews and feedback. We would have kept doing more interviews, but time and money. And also interviewees included farmers and ranchers, water managers, lawyers, ditch and water district managers, and other relevant water-related people. A lot of people fall into that final category of relevant water-related people. So, as I said, this is a collection of the thematic lessons that people have learned. So they are broad and overarching rather than very specific. So what this is not, it's not Hannah's or my particular viewpoint. It's not a verification of statements, a complete catalog of all possible lessons, or a comparison of the compacts, nor a recommendation of what you should do. All right, so I'm going to go over each of the lessons pretty quickly. There were 3 copies left, 3 hard copies of our report if you wanted to read it, but now there's just this one. So you're going to have to find it online to read the whole thing, because as I said, I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. But in the Republican, the Rio Grande, and the Arkansas River Basin, one of the key things that emerged from these interviews was that confronting limits of water is painful. And it's painful in 2 ways. It's painful in that it actually reduces the amount of water that irrigators have available to them, which changes agricultural production, which changes practices, it changes how ditches are operated. It has this major impact in how things are done and how they will continue to be done throughout the future. Second, confronting limits is painful in an emotional way, and that's something that we've kind of heard a little bit about today. It sucks. Like, I don't have to tell you that. I heard everybody tell me that, and you know that experience from drought. But when it comes outside from an administration, it hurts in a different kind of way. And so there is a real emotional cost to compact administration. One interviewee described this pain as the cost of irrigating in an upstream state. All right, lesson number 2, going to court is hazardous. Notice the lesson isn't don't go to court. It's going to court is hazardous. And that was actually one of the, well, I'll explain it first and then say that. But as an upstream state, we don't have a particularly successful track record in going to court when it comes to compact compliance. The lessons from the Arkansas, Rio Grande, all of these lessons and the Republican all showed us that going to court reduces those communities' options for how to achieve compliance. And the longer that those cases went on, especially in the Arkansas, the further their options were reduced. And so people in each basin noted that that lack of foresight and infighting within their communities prevented them from having some of those constructive conversations that they could have had back when they first realized there was an issue. And so with the benefit of hindsight, people in all 3 basins lamented the one-size-fits-all fixes that were imposed on them either by state agencies or in the Republican by a special master who I believe was from Maine. So one of the, I have so much to say, but I'm going to keep going. Okay. All right, I'm going to combine lessons 3 and number 4. So lesson 3 is scaffolding is a precondition for effective action. Sociologists really like to put words in quotations because we like to define them our own ways. And then relationships and trust facilitate building solutions. So what do I mean by scaffolding? It's more than just a foundation. It's basically the framework that you need to erect any sort of edifice. So that's things like pre-existing conditions, organizations, the social and resource-based networks that you need to be able to work together to get stuff done. So for example, when challenges related to groundwater arose, as most of you know in the San Luis Valley, members of Subdistrict 1 were able to draw on their collective experience of fighting water exportation prior to that in order to create some sort of solution. Now, that solution is still being worked out, right? But they were able to draw on those previous patterns and actions to be able to work together. Whereas when you look at the Republican Basin, because a lot of the farmers in the area were drawing on groundwater, there wasn't really any organizations that people could turn to say, hey, help us get together. In fact, they had to create a conservation board. And that board has had an additional challenge of trying to build trust within the community. So people described this process of building, of drawing on trusted leadership, the willingness and commitment of community members to take up the challenge. They described this as painful, laborious, but effective. So there's exciting things. Painful and laborious. All right, but effective. So number 5, it is a truth universally acknowledged. I have never heard a single producer say, you know what I love? Getting measured. That's great. Bring it on. But even after all of that, everyone in these basins are measured. Their water is measured. And it does have benefits that people begrudgingly admitted to. First, measurement can build trust. So one farmer I spoke with talked about how every morning he gets his cup of coffee and he sits down at his computer and he opens up his browser and he checks the levels of the river. And then he checks his own levels. And then he looks at all of his neighbors all around him and sees what they're doing. He's like, I had no problem calling any of those jokers out. I know exactly what they're doing, and the thing is, they know what I'm doing. And so it ended up building some trust that enabled them to work together, especially in situations of low water, outside of the realities of law. Like, hey, you need a little extra water? We can do this. I know what you've been doing, and I trust you. Second, and Ben talked about this morning, it can support better management, both at the basin level and in terms of meeting compact obligations, but also at a local ditch and individual farm or ranch level. Better management means more flexibility, and irrigators talked about changing their irrigation practices based on the new data, enabling them to be better stewards of both the resources that they had and their land. And then finally, it supports negotiation. So there I go with the quotations again. One experienced water lawyer, which experienced means old, but also experienced, lots of wisdom. I spoke with people with lots of wisdom. One wise water lawyer I spoke with talked about how the Arkansas just didn't really have the data that they needed to make a strong case in their lawsuit. That was one of the big issues, that there just wasn't the data. And so he said, you need good facts, because if you don't have the facts and somebody else has better facts, you lose. And so in all 3 basins, measurement has enabled them going forward to make stronger relationships with their water and also build up both on the individual level and at a larger level. All right, number 6. So carrots and sticks each have their place. So, and I should also add that the distinction between a carrot and a stick is kind of fuzzy. You know, a carrot can sometimes be a stick, and a stick can sometimes be a carrot. Depends on your perspective. But carrot here refers to incentives to reduce water use that are most effective when there is a big stick right behind it. We really, really want the carrot, and we really want the carrot to work, but in all 3 examples in these basins, it just didn't work on its own. People did not have the motivation or the ability, the resources to act until there was a big stick looming. And in all three cases, all three basins weren't able to act before they actually went through administration. So that's kind of like the downside of the story. But the hopeful part is that they learned from it. There's a lot of learning happening. And what that has meant is that these basins that have experienced compact administration, feeling that sting of forced curtailment, has encouraged them going forward to be more proactive as future issues have arisen. So for instance, in the Arkansas, in the Rio Grande, both communities have been able to address issues as they have arisen. In fact, the Arkansas was dealing with recharge pools as I was doing these interviews, and people directly pointed to that and saying, we were able to take action and we're gonna do stuff about this issue because we went through this experience before, and we know that not doing something really sucks, and we don't want to be told what to do until we have a chance to develop our own way of dealing with it. So in conclusion for that lesson, basically carrots on their own are not always effective, but they can be when there is a big stick or when there is agreement about what the problem is. People don't have to agree on how to solve it, but at least coming to the table and agreeing that there is a problem. All right, so overarching all of this, there was kind of this broad golden lesson. And earlier today, Hannah and I were both joking that maybe we should have renamed our report Adapt or Die. Now, there's a lot of death talk this morning. But basically, we don't know the future. And I'm really sorry to tell all of you, I don't know what the future holds. And as everyone pointed out this morning, nobody else does either. We can make some really great guesses. And that's basically what we are all trying to do, is draw on our experience, our knowledge, models. We're drawing on all these things to try to make our best guesses about what to do about the future, how to act, how to plan. And so what I can tell you is that earlier action enables more local control. I don't know what that action is, and I can't tell you. That's up to you. But taking action in some form is one of the best things that each of these basins talked about as their key wish, the thing that they wish they had done, wish they had made an effort to take action early on. So those are the overall lessons from this report. So basically, sure, earlier action is great, but if you don't have some of these other key pieces like scaffolding, then you need to start there. There you go. That's the lessons. Thank you.